Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever episode of Controversial Talk. Now, I'm really looking forward to this series. As you can see by the title of this video, today we are going to be talking about abortion. Simply because I think it's something that is very close to people's hearts. Especially if you've been through it, or you've known people who've been through it, or your religious views and things like that. It's a topic that people have quite strong views about on either end of the spectrum. So I thought it was a really good one to start off this brand new series called Controversial Talk that I'm going to just be doing once a week, and it's just going to be basically me talking to you guys, giving my opinions about controversial topics, and then you guys comment down below, tell me if you agree with me, disagree with me, kind of not really sure, and just have conversations with each other, discussions with each other, and maybe a bit of arguing as well. So I hope you enjoy this video, guys, and keep watching. Okay, so abortion. I just wanted to begin by talking about my views on abortion. First of all, in the majority of cases, I don't believe abortion is an acceptable option. That's not necessarily because of my religious views or anything like that, because I'm not overly religious, so it's not really come from that. I think for me, it's just a human right, really, just to be born and just to have the chance of life. So just as a disclaimer, I don't condone abortion in the majority of circumstances. So I do stand with a lot of religious people in that sense, from all different religions, who are very, very against abortion, and I understand why they are against it, and I would stand more on their side than the very, very other side, where they're sort of fighting in the streets for this abortion, for the abortion right. However, having said that, there are a few extreme circumstances where I would say abortion could become an acceptable option. Now, that doesn't mean that the person in that situation has to immediately choose the option of abortion. It just means that in my mind, in the certain extreme situations, which I'm going to list in a minute, abortion could become an option. I wouldn't, if one of these situations did come about and a person wasn't sure whether to go through with it or not, I wouldn't, if it was in one of these extreme situations that I'm going to list, I would say that abortion would become an acceptable option. I wouldn't condemn them. I mean, I wouldn't want to condemn anybody, but I wouldn't disagree with them if they went for abortion in these extreme circumstances. Again, as well, all of these extreme circumstances that I'm about to list, they're all hypothetical. I've never known anyone who's been through abortion. I've not experienced it. I'm sure people who are watching this have experienced it, whether they've had to make that decision themselves or they've known people have had to do that. So all situations are different, and I think as well, it's just the same principle of not getting a brush and just going like that and painting over a whole range of different circumstances. Each circumstance has to be treated individually because everyone is different. But I will now list you, I think there's about 5 different circumstances where I think abortion could become an acceptable option. Okay, so number one. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with this, but for me, the first extreme circumstance is in rape. If a woman, especially if she's under the age of 18, but any woman who is raped, and if they are in such an extreme shakiness, you know, they've really been shaken by that, you know, by that experience. I mean, anyone would be, but and they are in a way that they aren't fit to bear a child or aren't fit to mother a child properly, because of what's happened, and they are so psychologically distorted and don't, you know, and are damaged in that way psychologically because of what's happened. And again, you know, abortion perhaps wouldn't be the first option, but it would, in my eyes, it would be an acceptable option. For example, if one of my friends, if this happened to someone I know, and they said to me, what about abortion? I would say, okay, I understand why you want to make that decision in that circumstance of rape. But at the same time, you know, not every woman would want to do that. You know, they'd still want to have the child, even though they've been raped and things like that. But for me, that would become an acceptable option, but only to a certain point. I'm not sure how many weeks it is until the child starts to look like a human or something like that. I'm not really sure where my opinions stand on that, but it wouldn't really. I wouldn't believe in abortion in this circumstance if it was past a certain amount of weeks. I'm not really sure how many weeks or months. How many weeks really that would have to be the limit for me. I'm not really sure about that, because I'm not really sure about the process of development of a baby. I'm not really sure about that. But if it was quite early on, and the mother was so distraught and so psychologically damaged and really not fit really to bear a child, to mother a child properly, I would say that would be one of the very, very extreme circumstances where I would say, okay, I can understand why you want to make that decision to abort. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I would understand. And I think that there is a difference there between agreeance and understanding. You know, I still wouldn't be totally comfortable with murdering the child, because it is murder really. I wouldn't totally be comfortable with that, but it would just depend on the situation, I think, in terms of that situation and how the mother was psychologically, her psychological status. It would just depend on that, but I still wouldn't feel comfortable, I don't think. But I would be able to understand a little bit more why she made that decision. Okay, so circumstance number 2. This is sort of like a hypothetical one. I've sort of thought of this story in my mind just to get an example. But let's just say that I have a daughter, and she came up to me and she said, "Dad, I've got a child. I'm pregnant." And she was below the age of 16, and that's important. If she was below the age of 16, and definitely if she was below the age of 14, and she, number one, wasn't psychologically ready. Number two, you know, she wasn't sort of, she was too, I would say that'd be too young. Not necessarily 16, but definitely 14, depending on the situation. Definitely if she was 14 or below, I would definitely say that abortion would become an option. Especially because of, obviously, my hypothetical relationship with that, with my daughter, that would come into play. But even if, and this is sort of going into my third circumstance a little bit, but even if I didn't know the girl, even if I didn't know that person, and they were below sort of the age of 14, if we're talking about that, you know, I would say that will become, abortion will become an option for me, just because, and this is getting into my third reason, but just because I don't believe in a child bearing a child. I can't accept that. I really can't. And I know a lot of religious people are going to go, you know, they're just going to go like this, what are you doing? But I can't accept that. I can't accept that. I really can't accept it. You know, I've watched documentaries and things of girls who are sort of 14 and a lot younger than that, 12, and maybe even like 11, like, you know, really, you're going to accept that? You're going to accept that, you know, a 12-year-old girl can't abort a child, you know? She's not even developed at that stage fully, you know? She's probably not even into puberty yet. Like, that is, I just can't. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that, even religious people. I don't know, I mean, you tell me in the comments if you do. But I think a lot of religious people would still agree with that, you know, getting to the point where it's like a 12-year-old, it's like, really, you're going to accept, you're not going to give her the option to abort it, you know? Again, like the first circumstance, it depends how far she is in terms of the development and how far gone she is, you know, but if it is early on, and she, you know, she really doesn't want this child, and I mean, even at that stage, if we're talking about a 12-year-old, even at that stage, she doesn't even know herself. She doesn't even know what she wants. She doesn't know anything. And just going back to the hypothetical story about if it was my daughter that came to me at the age of 14 or 12 or an age like that, you know, I still have a responsibility for that child. That is still my child. And I have a responsibility to them to say, this is right or this is wrong, you know? And, you know, if it would put her life in danger by having this child, say she's 12 years old. I mean, this is like getting really cringy, like I hate talking about it because I just don't believe in a child bearing a child, but if she was like 13 years old, let's say, you know, and at that stage, the girls aren't even fully developed at that stage, you know, they're just getting into puberty at that stage, and I think it would be more dangerous, you know, to fully go with the pregnancy. I just think that would be wrong, and I think it would be wrong for a parent to put their child through that, because obviously, hypothetically, there's a child within your child, and obviously that's your grandchild, but at the end of the day, you have a responsibility for your child. You know, you have a responsibility for your child first, and that's the priority. In my eyes, that would be anyway. because your child is still a child. You know, at the age of 13, they're still children. So I think circumstance 2 and 3 have sort of mixed in with that, but basically, I just don't believe in a child bearing a child. I just think that's really wrong, and there are a lot of other complications that can come into effect if a child bears a child. It's you know, it's not nice. And for religious people, again, I respect and I understand why religious people feel the way they do, even about if it's like a 13-year-old having a child. I understand why they think that. I get it. However, we've got to think about the actual person who's already here, you know. It depends what you think when you think a child becomes a child, you know. Is it from the moment of conception, or is it after a certain number of weeks? You know, all of these circumstances do come into play, and they do affect my opinion. But in general, I just don't believe in a child bearing another child. And if you put it into the hypothetical situation of that child being my daughter, I think that again just emphasizes it even more. You know, you've first and foremost got a responsibility for that child, and if it's going to put your own child in danger by continuing with that pregnancy, you know, what type of parent does that make you? You know, you're putting your own child at risk just to save a fetus. You know what I mean? I don't know. It depends where you stand on that religiously. But for me, just to conclude sort of circumstances 2 and 3, because they've sort of merged into one, a child bearing a child, just that, I don't agree with that, and I can't agree with that just because of my own morals. I just can't agree with that. That is wrong to me. But again, if let's say it is a 13-year-old and she says, no, I'm ready for this, I can do this, and there aren't any major, you know, and you've got medical advice, and there aren't any major medical what's the word, sort of consequences of continuing with the pregnancy, then I would sort of think, okay, then she seems responsible, she seems sensible-ish, you know, she feels like she can do this and it's medically going to be okay, then maybe abortion wouldn't need to come into it. But again, it's only an option. And in some of these extreme circumstances, like the 2 that I've just been talking about, abortion, in my eyes, only becomes an option then. You don't have to jump onto abortion and do it. I'm just saying that could become an option. If you're sitting down looking at all the options, abortion could then become an option. Depending on the situation, of course. So that was circumstances 2 and 3 sort of merged together. Circumstance number 4, again, is something that is quite controversial as well, obviously, because it's controversial talk, so yeah. My fourth circumstance where I think abortion could become an option is the circumstance of like a medical consequence of continuing with the pregnancy. So say that the child quite early on, again, it all depends on at what stage of the pregnancy this is at. But say it is early on and the doctors have said this child is going to be severely is going to be severely ill. Now, I'm not saying disabled, because I don't believe that abortion becomes an option when a child is disabled at all. I think that child still has a life to live, even if they're disabled or Down syndrome or anything like that. Like, that is 100% black and white. I don't believe in abortion in that circumstance at all. But say the doctors say something like, this child has a very, very rare disease that we can't treat, and within sort of, I don't know, they're going to be in major pain, they're going to die very, 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 very young, within a couple of hours perhaps, or days, and they're going to be in extreme pain throughout their very, very short life, and it is early on in the pregnancy, then I would say that abortion would become an option. Now, a lot of religious people would say, or a lot of people in general would just say, you don't have to be religious, but people in general would just say, well, you've still got to give that child a life, because the doctors might be wrong, and they could be wrong, and I would hate myself if they were wrong, if I made that decision to abort in that situation. But that brings in trust of the medical advice, of course, but I would trust the medical advice. What you could do is you could get different doctors' opinions, so don't just take one doctor's opinion, take a couple of doctors' opinions, and if they're all saying the same thing, then I would say in that circumstance, the child, the option of abortion could become, an option there. Similarly, in sort of the same sort of circumstance as well, similarly, in the same circumstance, if the doctors say, and I'm using plural there, doctors, don't just get one doctor's opinion, if the doctors say that, the mother will die, the mother will die, there's a very, very high chance that she will die, and it is early on in the pregnancy, and there's not anything necessarily wrong with the child in this circumstance, but the mother will die. It's pretty much certain that the mother will die. In that circumstance, again, it depends on my relationship. If it is my wife, then, that would be very, very difficult. If it's just a random person, a random woman, again, but morally, you can't really get out of that situation, because you're killing twice. You're killing either way, aren't you? If you allow the child if you allow the pregnancy to go on, and the mother will die, you're killing the mother, but if you abort, then you're killing the child. So in that circumstance, you can't really, this is what I mean by extreme circumstances. That's pretty difficult, especially if this woman is your wife, that's really difficult. But in that circumstance, let's say I was in that circumstance and this was my wife, I would say that abortion could become an option in that circumstance. Obviously, it depends what she thinks as well. Obviously she doesn't want to die, maybe she'll say, no, but it's such a hard situation that I've thought of a really, really good situation, well, bad situation there, but it's a good example. I just think that in that situation, she would have to make the decision with me, but if it was my own personal preference, it would have to go to abortion in that situation, because obviously we have the child, but I have vows to this woman, you know, to my wife, ultimately to my wife, you know, and knowing that she will die, you know, basically killing her knowingly, just, I wouldn't be able to deal with that. That would be too much for me. And I mean, you could say the same thing about the child, but it's sort of, which one do you want to kill and which one don't you want to kill? And again, if it's very early on in the pregnancy, it would have to go to my wife, who you know, we'd have to abort, because in that circumstance, you know, there is a person here. There is a person. Your wife is here on this side, you know, and you have vows to this person. You might have other children with this person, you know, and I know this doesn't make it any better, but if there's on this side and the child is literally that big, you know, just like a pea, you know, I just think, and also you've got to think as well, you can't think about just the present moment either. You've got to think about the future. If the pregnancy did go on and the wife died, you know, the woman died, the mother died, what would that do to the child? That would be awful. That would be absolutely horrifying for me. Imagine knowing that it was your fault that you killed your own mother. I mean, I know a lot of women die in childbirth, and it must really badly affect, you know, the mother. But if it was me, if I was the child, I'd feel awful. Obviously, the child couldn't do anything about it, but still, down the line, you know, in the teenage years, when they're going through a lot, they may start to hate themselves because, you know, of that situation. And I think when people discuss abortion, they only talk about the present moment. They don't talk about the future consequences, and that's something that really needs to be discussed. You know, if we did have to make a decision and we were discussing this, I would bring up the future consequences. You know, what is this child going to have to go through without a mother, knowing that in childbirth, you know, the mother died? Not necessarily because of them, but just because she was linked to them, and her death was linked to the birth of the child. I don't know, that would be really difficult. So in that circumstance, if it was me, depending on the circumstances as well, you know, how far along is the pregnancy, what does the wife think, you know, what does she want to do, you know, what I would say abort in that situation, in that very extreme situation. I just think, you know, as the husband, I have a duty to my wife before anyone else, especially if the other option is the size of a pea, you know. And I know that doesn't make it any better, and I know a lot of religious people will disagree with that, but you know, you've got a duty to this person who is already living a life, and that you have lived with for many years perhaps, you know. And I think in that situation I would have to put my wife first, and I think a lot of people would respect that, you know. I mean, even religious people, I don't think they would expect you to have to, you know, kill your own wife knowingly, you know. And I don't think, and as well, you know, obviously your wife doesn't want to die, you know, and you can always try again, and there are a lot of circumstances, and that is a very extreme one, and now my head is like hurting after having to think about that, but that is circumstance number 4. Okay, so circumstance number 5. This one is quite interesting because I'm sure I watched it in a film or something, I can't remember, but basically in this circumstance, and this is the last one really that I can think of right now, where I would think abortion would become an option, an acceptable option, would be if a woman was not necessarily raped, but if a woman was pregnant. This isn't really about how she got pregnant, this circumstance. This is more about the surrounding circumstances. Say she's pregnant, but also say that she has literally no one. She has no one, okay? She herself is ill. Yeah? So she herself is ill, she has no one around her, no family. Because again, that's what people forget. People forget this so much when we're talking about abortion. They forget about the future consequences, and they also forget, they sort of narrow their mind, to the present moment. You can't do that. A child is with you forever, for life, for the whole life, and the decision can't just be made thinking about the present moment. It has to be made thinking about the whole future on both sides of the spectrum, whether you believe in abortion or not. I just think in the situation of a woman who has nobody, because it takes more than one person to bring up a child. It takes people around them. You need family, you need support, you need things like that around you. Say she has no one around her, she has no money, she lives in a country where you can't get benefits and things like that from the government, and things like that. It depends on the situation. So this is one that I sort of struggle with, because then I'm just thinking in my mind like, yeah, but she'll get through it. You'll always be able to get through it. But then if you add on the circumstance of she's gonna die, like she has like an illness, like the child's alright, but when the child's born, she will die eventually, maybe a couple of years after the child's born. Maybe that changes it a little bit, maybe. Obviously the child will go into an orphanage. Do you want to do that to a child? Don't know. I think this is the one that really sort of is the weaker of the 5 circumstances for me. I don't know, it just depends if there are extreme circumstances like that, she has no one, she's ill, she's probably gonna die maybe a couple of years after the child's born, a couple of months after the child's born. She has no money, she has no hope of being able to work. I just think it would be unfair to bring a child into that situation, and really it would be quite, I don't want to say immoral, but it would be quite, it wouldn't be very sensible to do that. I think you're being, although people are just going to be shouting at me through the screen now. I know they are. People are going to be shouting at me through the screen saying, yes, but still give the chance of life, and taking the chance of life, how is that fair? And I get it so much. I understand why people would think that. I get it. But if there are extreme surrounding circumstances, not necessarily about the birth or the actual child itself, but if there are extreme circumstances surrounding the child, then I would say maybe abortion could become an option, perhaps, possibly, depending on the extremeness of the circumstances surrounding the birth. But again, that one's probably probably the weakest circumstance of the 5. So yeah, that is my views on abortion. Those are the 5 different circumstances where I would say abortion could become an option. You don't have to jump onto it and do it straight away, but it could become an option, an acceptable option. And if someone was to come to me and say, I'm in this situation, is abortion acceptable to you? I would say, okay, you're in that situation, you're in that circumstance, abortion is... I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge you for making that decision of abortion in your situation, in that extreme circumstance. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, just tell me down in the comments, or just dislike this video, or like it if you did like it. Obviously, this is a controversial topic. If a lot of you hate me now because of my opinions, then okay, but just still subscribe. You know, even if you don't like me, just subscribe anyway, because, you know, I'm going to keep doing these topics, so, and they're going to get even more controversial, so I hope that you guys enjoyed it. What else? I think that's it. I've really enjoyed doing this video. Suggest some other topics down in the comments. I do want to hear your guys' opinions, so just go for it. Get on that comment section and write a massive paragraph about what you think about everything I've said in this video. Stop the video and just go down there and give it your all and just tell me what you think, and I will read. The bigger the paragraph, the more chance I'm going to see it and I'm going to want to read it. You know, and as well, if you hate me for this, if you hate me, that's fine, but tell me why you don't agree with it, or vice versa, tell me why you agree with some of my opinions. You know, but again, at the end of the day, these are all hypothetical situations. I've never been involved in abortion. I don't know anyone who's ever been involved in it. But, you know, these are just really hypothetical situations, and obviously if you're in that situation, the circumstances or your opinions might change dramatically because it's actually happening. You know, I'm just stood in a room talking about it. If it was actually to happen right now, maybe I would change my opinions completely, because if you're in that moment, your opinions do change. So don't take it too seriously, but also have a discussion, have an argument if you want to down in the comments. Just remember my comment policy. Don't start insulting each other. You know, we don't need that. You can have a civilized, intelligent conversation, argument, discussion, whatever you want to call it, without insulting people, swearing, things like that. Just tell me your opinions, whether you like me, dislike me, whatever, don't care, but just let me know. And I will see you in my next video. Also, again, just to suggest down in the comment section some really controversial topics, and I will try those out in future episodes of Controversial Talk. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I will see you in my next video.